Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Fadila Zerka will defend the academic thesis, Distributed Learning for Optimal Radiomics Knowledge. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Dear Prorector, dear members of the Corona, dear family, friends, and audience, in the coming 15 minutes, I will be presenting you my thesis on distributed learning for optimal radiomics knowledge. The robustness of AI models is directly linked to the quality and the quantity of the data that was used during the training. However, sharing medical data is technically difficult to set up. It is time-consuming and costly to maintain and to ensure the security of such databases. Additionally, data is sharing medical data is regulated by national and international regulations such as GDPR in the Europe and HIPAA in US, additionally to ethics. This causes a waste of medical data as healthcare is suffering from its inability to uncover all the potential data can offer in optimizing the clinical processes. AI models in healthcare can be very useful to make use of the data. By making use of the data, we need first to analyze it by extracting relevant features, such as clinical genomics or, for instance, imaging features from which we can extract radiomics features such as shape and others. These features will then be modeled using machine or deep learning algorithms such as SVM, CNNs, and others. After the models have been learned, they are then ready to be used in, for instance, predictive analysis for treatment plans, and also they are really good at saving the time because they are fast in performing the predictions. However, these models can be used, for example, to facilitate screening, to facilitate diagnosis, prognosis. Additionally, it can help in assessing the response to treatment. I already can see some of the audience thinking, you just said that it is hard to share medical data, so how can we then perform such learnings and overcome the limitations? Well, one way of overcoming the data sharing limitations is by using privacy-preserving distributed learning, because it allows the partners of a network to locally train and analyze their data and then only share model parameters with a centralized authority that will aggregate the learning. And then it sends them the updated parameters so that they can perform a learning for another round. Then this would just continue until a convergence criteria are met. This sounds great. However, the implementation of distributed learning actually implies to do some changes, for instance, organizational change within the healthcare institution, because we need to adopt new data management techniques such as the FAIR principles. The data needs to be standardized in a similar way throughout the whole partners. For instance, some hospitals would grade severity of a disease between 1 and 3, and others would grade it between 1 and 5. So this has to be done in the same way. And then there is another thing that needs to be adapted, which is the employees' roles, because they need to be able to tackle more technical tasks. In addition to all of this, all the partners in a distributed learning network are required to trust the authority that is aggregating the learning on which that hosts the server actually. On February 2016, at 19, we found only 6 articles that were published on distributed learning for healthcare. And what is most important to information that I want you to take from here is like the network size of those studies varied only between 3 and 10 partners. So the question is actually, is there a way that one can not remove the need for decentralized authority so that the partners would not need to trust each other or any other authority? The answer for this is yes. One should be able to do that. And one way to reach this decentralization is by using peer-to-peer blockchain. I believe that most of you have heard of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin. These cryptocurrencies are all relying on the blockchain, and they are peer-to-peer systems. And the blockchains actually store blocks of information. Then the way to add a block of information to the chain is by first sending this block to the miners. The miners will compete to solve a complex puzzle, and then the one that solves the puzzle the first is then being able to save it to the chain. This block is linked to the previous block on the chain by linking it to the hash of the previous block. This hashing system makes the blockchain immutable by design. Therefore, it enforces the trust, the traceability, and security of the information that is stored on it. Herein, we propose a fully decentralized distributed learning infrastructure to analyze medical data. The process of our decentralized distributed learning framework, named Chain Distributed Learning and shortly CDISTREAM, starts when a partner registers to the Ethereum smart contract. It gives them the time to train a model and then save it to cloud. After that, the process will be ended. When this process is ended, the next partner on the list will be able to perform the same steps. After all the partners finish the training, if there is one or more partners that had problems training or uploading their models, then they will be given a chance actually to retrain the latest model that is on the list using their own data and upload it. We evaluated CDISTREAM on a local simulation using the open source of non-small cell radiomics datasets, which consist of 422 subjects. The data was first split into training and global test set. The training set was further split to simulate different scenarios of different distribution of partner numbers and also data set size. All after the training was performed for each scenario, the final models we got were all compared against a centralized model, which is our reference model. Here we can see the area under the curve of the receiver operating characteristic curve, which is a widely used method in the research community to evaluate the performance of the AI model. So basically, the bigger this area under the curve is, the better the performance of the model is. Here we can see an overlap between the ROC curves of the 6 scenarios, 6 models trained in the 6 scenarios. This just gives us the impression and tells us that the models that were trained here have an equivalent performance. CDISTREAM was further tested in real world settings by deploying the CDISTREAM smart contract to Ethereum Ring by test network, and then to test and evaluate this prototype, we used the prostate MRI and ultrasound dataset, which consists of 1,151 subjects, and only 1,110 subjects were eligible for further analysis. We split the data into first training and global test set, and then the training set was further split to simulate a network of 2 partners. Here we used a pre-trained ResNext 50 that was pre-trained on ImageNet dataset to predict cancer group grade, which consists of 5 classes of to classify. Here we have the ROC curve of the final model. What we can see here is that some classes can be harder to predict as compared to the others, but overall it is possible to train distributed learning using real-world settings using blockchain. We further evaluated distributed learning classifiers on small sets of data to uncover the potential of distributed learning in the case of rare diseases. Here we used 4 open source data sets comprising different features such as clinical, demographics, radiomics, and dosimetric. For each data set, we simulated 4 use cases. The first one is the reference use case, centralized model, then a split into 2 partners. Then we evaluated the extreme use case where each partner holds only 1 patient. And then we also evaluated what a random shuffle of this data can have on the performance of the global model. All these use cases were run on 3 classifiers: support vector machines, logistic regressions, and perceptron. The workflow first starts by splitting the training data into training, test, and validation. The validation data is used to fine-tune the model parameters. And then once the best model parameters are selected, then the model is trained using those in a distributed manner. Once the model is actually finished on the training, so we evaluate the performance of these models using the test set that was previously taken out from the training data. Here we can see the results of the AUC of each model using each different use case. What we can see here, is that distributed learning actually can have similar performance as to centralized learning when trained in a distributed manner. And it is also like a big new way, for instance, to apply AI in the case of rare diseases, where it is not possible for a single hospital to have enough data to apply AI. The future vision of distributed learning is to reach a global clinical knowledge sharing by providing access to more medical data, allowing to improve model generalizability and performance. We need, however, to evaluate complex forms of sequential learning, such as updating the model after each epoch of the training, for instance. We need also to evaluate different feature selection and harmonization techniques on decentralized learning, because this can increase the precision of our models. Last but not least, we need to evaluate new versions of the blockchain technology, because it is cheaper, faster, and it's more environmentally friendly. However, mainly we need to do that because it is sustainable, transparent platform that can encourage the clinical collaboration. To conclude, we found a new way to access more data while preserving the privacy of this data by means of decentralized blockchain technology. The distributed learning, especially decentralized distributed learning, can expose the models to more quality data. It can improve the model performance and its scalability, and especially it gives new ways, for instance, for continuous learning, when the learning keeps continuing during the time. Additionally, it can encourage the clinical collaboration. I would thank you all for your attention, and I give now the word back to the prorector.
Thank you very much. We will start now with the opposition. And the opposition will be opened by Professor van England, Professor of Pathobiology of Cancer at Maastricht University. And Professor van England is also chair of the assessment committee. Professor van England.
Thank you, Mrs. Prorector. Dear candidate, first of all, congratulations with this beautiful thesis that I've read with a lot of pleasure. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not an expert in data science nor in blockchain. But I do work on a field that has remarkable parallels to the work that has been presented in your thesis. So I would like to start with you with the introduction. On page 6, you state that in healthcare, machine learning has greatly contributed to improving diagnosis and prognosis by facilitating clinical decision-making. Can you comment on that statement? Because I'm in a clinical field and I don't see that much applications in which this field has really improved clinical decision-making.
Yes, highly esteemed opponents, thank you very much for the nice words and the question. Actually, a great example for this is, for instance, the COVID pandemic that we all have encountered during the last 2 years. AI, for instance, significantly helped for instance, confirming the patient if they are actually COVID positive or not, and also in helping helping them to know, okay, because for instance, during the first pandemic and the second one, it was really hard. All the ACU were like they were having lack of devices, etc. So the AI actually helped the practitioners back then to decide, okay, shall we keep this patient in the hospital or not, by just looking at the imaging information for instance, CT scans or any type of scans that were performed. So this is in addition to the PCR tests that are, of course, like the first way of detecting the disease. So this is an example of like how AI helped during these last 2 years.
Yeah, and was that also used in routine hospitals?
Yes, I'm sure that it was used, for instance, in CHU in Belgium. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's great to hear. And going to your thesis, I see that you come up with some recommendations. You beautifully illustrate, I think, the pitfalls of the field, and you have some recommendations and frameworks on what needs to be done. But what actually needs to be done to bring these all these tools with this huge possibilities? I think what really needs to be done to make this a tool that can be used in routine clinics, as you mentioned, for example, the COVID tool.
Yes. For instance, the first thing which I think we need to start from down to up, the first thing is the standardization of, for instance, how the data is stored and how it is accessed and how it is labeled first, because an AI tool will be able just to see one thing. So if we train the AI tool to classify, for instance, a disease severity from 1 to 5, if we give it like an image that is labeled, it will give us this label from 1 to 5, but then if it predicts it to 5, right, and then it is actually run in a hospital where the grade is from 1 to 3, this 5 will not make sense to them, right? Then we need first to standardize the way the data is saved and stored, so that we are able to use actually the AI that that AI tools that are being used and trained in a distributed manner. Because otherwise, like the centers will have to train AI on their own data so that it can make sense to them, right? And then, however, this model will not be able to generalize better if they receive a patient. For instance, if the model was trained in MUFG in the Netherlands, and then they receive a patient that comes from Brazil, for instance, which is a completely different population, and then the model will not be able to predict correctly, right? It cannot generalize to these unseen types of features.
Okay, what about, in addition to these technical improvements, what about adoption? How can we make sure that this will be adopted by clinics?
By actually facilitating the integration to the clinical routine. For instance, one shouldn't impose to use a new software, because then the healthcare practitioners will have to be trained for that, and they will have to spend time to log in and to do all these kind of tasks. So the best is to integrate those tools, keep them running on the background, however, make them facilitate the usage to the doctors by just integrating them to their tools that they are actually using in the current routine, right? Okay,
just one quick prediction. So in cancer research, less than 1% of biomarkers is being translated to the clinic. What is your prediction for these AI tools that you describe in your thesis?
Can you repeat, please?
Yes, in biomarker research, less than 1% of biomarkers being translated to a clinical application. Less than 1%. Mm-hmm. What is your prediction for this AI field and for radiomics?
I think it gives, it encourages to use such collaborations, because you do not have to trust anyone during the process. So you are sure that your data is private with you. So it's actually, you feel secure about that your data is handled in the good way, because it doesn't leave your institution. So hopefully this will encourage actually the adoption of the other AI in the other fields.
Okay, thank you. I'll return the word to the pro-actor.
Thank you very much. The opposition will be continued by Professor Mak. Professor Mak is Professor of Electrical Engineering at the Université de Louvain in Louvain-la-Neuve, Belgium. Professor Mak.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Prorector. I'm very honored to be here, and I would like first to congratulate the candidate for the nice publication list, but also she was an excellent engineer, I would say, because she succeeded to do distributed learning without distributed data, for example, by simulating the split of data among several hospitals. And she did the things really on Ether blockchain by using Liquidity, open source language. So I was very impressed as an engineer on the nice way that the candidate took. So if we speak about data, if we split an homogeneous batch of data in different sites, we have the same quality on all the sites, which is not the reality, because in reality, we will have different quality, and even more, the quality will change in time. So for time to time, the quality of data will increase. And so you showed in one slide that the receiving operating curve, the ROC of a distributed system like you design, is similar to the ROC of centralized distribution. So could you say a few words about continual learning? When the quality of data is improving in time, how would you see your system to behave? And what would you recommend to be adaptive to the increase of quality of the data provided to the different participants in the system?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for all the nice words and the question. Yes, this is an important point that you raised, because when embedding blockchain, in our use case, we used a public blockchain where we don't need to have this centralization, such as like the conventional distributed learning, mainly which was used in federated learning. Of course, there are other types of distributed learning. So by using blockchain, we need to decentralize, and hence we will have such a sequential type of learning where like each partner will train and then the next one will wait and then update that model using their own data. So this is really good because it allows continuous learning as you suggested. However, so one needs to pay attention, for instance, to the way the learning happens so that the model will not forget the knowledge that was learned. So this can be reached by making flexible models so that they can dynamically allow, for instance, the network layers to accommodate to the novel new knowledge that they are learning.
Yeah, so you answer above what I was expecting, since you take care that the continual learning should still be able to solve the problem on lower quality data. So to avoid think of treating lower quality data. So I appreciate this answer. Mm-hmm. So my second question is about the two kind of concepts that we can manage in such a system. One is anonymity. And when we do federated learning, we are speaking a lot about anonymity because we take several patients together. And even if you can retrieve the name of a patient from his or her DNA, when you do batching, putting the data together, you preserve some anonymity. Of course, there are some analysis about anonymity leakage. And on the other hand, we have the privacy. So we have people learning together and who are using a blockchain. And probably one way to increase the adoption of the models in hospital environment would be to incentivize people providing data by giving them some token. And there your blockchain system is very open to incentivize the data provider. But I would like you a little bit to see a little bit more, because you were speaking a lot about privacy, not so much about anonymity. And I would like you to put some order in the concept. I hope you follow my question. So on the one hand, we have anonymity, and privacy could be the coalition of several hospitals who want to keep for themselves the model. The model is not public, and they want to make money or to create some value or to share some common rules on their private network. So I would like a small words and small discussion around this concept.
Yes, of course. This is really important, right? Because why we need to preserve the privacy of the data is because of all the issues that are related with the anonymity of that the patient should have, right? If I don't want to be known, I shouldn't be known. And then in such, for instance, when we use blockchain, used public blockchain, it is open for everyone to see. So one thing what we need to do, and what we did in the thesis, is that we first do not put all the information in there. We just put information about like global information. How many patients in a center were used to train the model, so that all the others would know how much. What is the performance of the model that was trained using that data, so that it's also transparent for everyone to know. And this is actually really good because it can help in the further processes if like the model that was trained would be commercialized. So this can help in the discussions around the royalties, for example. However, when we save, for instance, share, there is one thing that we send in share is the model parameters. So even those model parameters to keep the information secure and anonymized. So first they are encrypted. For us, we use the standard AES and 265. So it's the advanced encryption.
A good encryption system, the best one.
Yes, it's really good for long-term storage, and which is, for instance, those weights are going to be stored for a long time, allowing the healthcare centers to use them, right? So this is one way to keep it anonymized, and we just need to pay attention to what we save into blockchain, because we just put information that is relevant for the partners to know, but we do not put, for instance, the blood pressure or any kind of this kind of information. So that.
And so, my last point is how to incentivize people to provide.
Sorry,
data.
can I break in because?
Okay. Sorry. Thank you very much for the answer.
Yeah,
I was happy. Thank you.
Yeah, we have to continue.
I perfectly understand. Thank you very much, Mrs. Porter.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Zamani Esteki from the Department of Clinical Genetics of Maastricht University.
Thank you, Mrs. Pro-Rector. It's been a pleasure to read your thesis, and I want to congratulate you and your supervisors for this nice piece of work. As you indicated also on your page 70 of your thesis, quality of data is very important, right? And you might get different heterogeneity of data, which is like the type of, like, for instance, you worked on, so I like your chapter 4 specifically, you use like CT scans, and specialists, they might take these pictures like in different ways. So my question is how you handle this heterogeneity. You explained a bit in your thesis, but it was not that clear to me.
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much for the nice words and the question. This is actually taking care of the heterogeneity of the data is a really important point in like multicentric studies, but also in distributed learning, and especially in sequential distributed learning. Because in the case of federated learning, we can put information about this data into the centralized model and then to the centralized server, and then we can see that with statistics we can see like the differences, and then we can, for instance, use some kind of pre-processing, etc., to bring the data to a more similar distribution. However, in the decentralized learning, it is a big challenge because we need to figure out what is the best way to standardize this data and to take care of the heterogeneity. But the first thing is, first we need to have a look at the information that is from the data. For instance, in chapter 4, as you said, like we had a look at before training, we first set up the model parameters based on the data, which means we ran a first round throughout the whole partners. Then we figure out what are the best, what is the parameter that gives us a best performance. For us, we use the AUC as the metric, but it's possible to use any other metric depending on the problem that is tackled. And then after that, we use the final, train the final model. But there is more to doing that in terms of pre-processing, etc. Just before going and trying to find the best parameters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you also indicated about like smart contracts. You use Remix IEE and also Solidity, but
Yes.
I couldn't really capture why you went for Solidity more. Did you do some test, or which kind of test you did to select Solidity?
Yes, Solidity is the programming language used by Ethereum. The main thing that we went for is to look for the available blockchains, and then which ones are like the more secure, robust, and also used and validated by different, for instance, companies, and also that are used by the wide public. Back on the time in 2019, like the most secure blockchain is Ethereum. First, we are interested in public blockchain because we don't just want to remove the trust issue that is actually linked with distributed learning. Because if we do distributed learning generally, we have to trust the partners, because we have to trust that they are giving us the quality of the data they promised when signing the contract. We have also to trust the authority that is hosting the server that aggregates the learning. To remove this, we need to use public blockchain and not private blockchain or a hybrid blockchain. Throughout the public blockchain, Ethereum is the one that is the more secure, and also the one that is tested more, and that's why we went for it. And then inevitably we had to use Solidity to develop the smart contract.
Okay, thank you very much. And then,
sorry,
yeah,
sorry,
it's okay.
to interrupt again, but
yeah,
the time is up. Thank you very much. The opposition will be continued by Professor Lazovic, Professor of Distributed Systems at the Rijksuniversiteit Groningen. Professor Lazovic.
Yeah, thank you. Dear candidate, first of all, thank you for your work on your thesis. I found it very interesting, and I'm always fascinated by multidisciplinary work where computing science is involved, and some recent advances in artificial intelligence being applied to real-world problems in other domains open so many interesting opportunities. So I'm really happy to see it. And thank you for your work and congratulations on the achieved results. My first question will be on machine learning versus the rest, because there is a famous and very influential paper from Google, I think it's published in 2015, called Hidden Technical Depth in Machine Learning Systems. And authors there analyzed all successful machine learning projects from Google that had back then, and they showed that it was only about 5% that they spent on machine learning, and it was about 95% of time was spent on doing all the other steps: collection and storing data, data preprocessing, feature extraction, infrastructure management, monitoring, and so on and so on. Essentially saying that the real bottleneck is not in machine learning, but elsewhere. Essentially, for any serious result in artificial intelligence, we have to spend 95% on something which is not really AI or ML. The paper is 7 years old. I'm curious, for your experience in your PhD project, what is your experience? How much time have you spent on machine learning, deep learning algorithms, and how much on engineering in infrastructure, data collection, extraction, and so on? Is it still the same? And my question would be essentially, what challenges do you see outside of machine learning in your domain? What research and engineering challenges do you think need to be solved to be successful in this area? Or probably everything is fine and we just need to do more data crunching by deep learning, and that would be it.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much. I really appreciate your words. Thank you also for the questions. Yes, actually, this paper is really great. And even though it dates from 2015, however, it was not meant to test the medical data and how the time that engineers spent into accessing medical data. Because in healthcare, it is even like it takes even more time to first analyze the data before training, especially in the multicentric use cases. Why? Because even in one country, the same country, one hospital can use a different grading system than another. One hospital can use different acquisition parameters compared to another, and then this just makes the data very different. Even if it's a CT scan, data from a CT scan, for instance, chest CT that you get from both hospitals, you will see that the quality is very much different, the labels are different, etc. So we need to make sense of all of this. One countries would store them, like all the information related to the data, in one language, another one will do in a different language. So this also needs to be translated and then put on to the same format. So it is actually more challenging very challenging in healthcare, and it's still like that. However, there is a nice principle that a group in Maastricht University work on, which is called the fair data principles, which just means that we need to make the data accessible, and then also it is made in a standardized way so that everyone can reuse this data. And there is a wide number of hospitals now that are trying to use this principle, and then by adapting such new management of the data, it actually will improve and make the time for pre-processing the data shorter. Can you please remind me the second part of your question?
No, but I think you covered. And if I'm given 2 more minutes, I would rather ask a different question, if I'm allowed to.
If you can make it short and a short answer.
Okay, I will try to, like, 1 minute.
Okay.
I am curious then to follow up on the question from my colleague, which asked about the heterogeneity of data in your experiments. Specifically, when you prepared experiment for federated learning paper, you essentially took one training data set and split it randomly and use essentially the same data set. I'm curious, of course, it shows the feasibility of the approach, but I'm curious whether this result will hold if different hospitals will indeed have data sets with different parameters accuracy, bias, completeness, outliers, and so on, will that be preserved? And do you want that to be preserved? And overall, I'm curious how the approach will deal with that, and probably what kind of additional experience you would like to do, and what would be the next steps overall. Again, not a long answer, just a short one. We are not apparently given much time for it.
Yes, sure. Indeed, in that work, the main idea was to test the feasibility of integrating blockchain and distributed learning. However, in the last chapter, we deployed the infrastructure to test it in real world. And then in this part, we actually, before adding a model, the performances of this model is actually evaluated. This is one way to see, okay, how the data is actually contributing to the learning of the model. And then another way, which is actually going to be on the future works, as we need to take a look at what are the best ways to manage those heterogeneities, and then apply it in a sequential learning scheme, for example, so that the data will be first processed in the same way, and then all the parameters that are used are actually taken based on the information that was taken from this data.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the answers. And the opposition will be continued by Professor Peters. Professor Peters, Professor of Biomedical Data Sciences at Hasselt University. Professor Peters.
Yes, thank you. So indeed, also from my side, Fadila, I really appreciated reading your work. Your work really positions actually at the intercept of two of our own PhD students. So my first thought when I got the PhD is, why didn't we meet before, right? The mysterious ways of academics, specifically because we are actually having already a joint PhD with Maastricht. I was really blown away that so close in my network something like this was happening. So I was really very pleasantly surprised. But now, of course, I have some questions. So in our group, there is actually a meme circulating that says, "You need blockchain? No. Are you sure? Yes." Because until now, nobody really has managed to convince me for the need of blockchain in a healthcare setting, although that intuitively I see the theoretical advantages, having the privacy risk reduced, making it more secure, keeping track of everything that happens. But in my mind, the disadvantages remain still very high. The computing goes up, the complexity of installing it, getting it implemented in an ecosystem of healthcare, where it is already so difficult to talk to hospitals and get them to implement simple things. Having then this complexity of blockchain around it. So I have a statement that says, in healthcare, we have 99 problems and blockchain is not one of them. But only a fool never changes her mind, right? And I would like you to give you the final chance to make me change my mind. Please.
Highly esteemed opponent, I'm very happy to hear your words. Thank you very much for that and for the question also. Of course, blockchain is not the only way to do things. It's one way of doing, but there are, of course, other ways. However, when usually in healthcare, it's using the data and going and using, for instance, participating in multicentric studies is usually slowed down by all this ethics and everything that is surrounding the data access. And then with the blockchain, then at least we don't have to trust any of those entities. We can join any type of multicentric study knowing that we do not have to trust anyone, because we can see everything that can happen there. No one can come and then say, okay, I will give them bad data. I will get the knowledge from their data, but I will not let them learn properly from my data, but by adding some biased information, etc. Then that can be seen, because you can see the performance of the model that was trained in there. So this is one advantage of the blockchain, is you can immediately spot like any misbehavior of the partners that happen. This can just let you go and then learn and join any studies without needing to trust the people that are there, that they are giving you the right data. Also, if, for instance, now, like there are like a lot of, for instance, in FDA and then a lot of grants that encourage using distributed learning, because if you want to use the data and get the potential of the data and implement the deep learning, for instance, artificial intelligence, make sense of the data that we have and use it to the fullest, we need to have access to more data. This is inevitable because we cannot say we are applying AI when using 100 data points. So a blockchain can help if we want to commercialize the model that we learned collaboratively with others. It will just help us into knowing, okay, I want to have this much % of the royalties. And I think I'm eligible for that because look at the history. It is there. I'm not saying it's there, it exists. So this is one thing that is very, very hard to reach without the use of blockchain. Because you can store information in a server, but that server is managed by someone that can actually change that. And you do not have the time to go every day and look at the records and then how others contributed to the learning, etc. So at some point, if someone wants to change that, they can change it. So yes, this blockchain can promise and not others.
Okay, thank you so much. So, and then I would like to go
Please, very short, very short.
Okay, so if it's already my last question, I think indeed I would like to use that time to at least mention that we are definitely interested in the kind of expertise you built during your PhD. So if you are interested in a postdoctoral position, I would definitely be very happy to at least have that conversation. And I wish you a lot of success moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you. The opposition will be continued by Dr. Anko Lekar from the Department of Precision Medicine at Maastricht University.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I would like to begin by congratulating you and your promotion team on your thorough work on this thesis. I would like to focus on the practical application of your work in the clinical setting. So in chapter 6, you demonstrate the use of a privacy-preserving distributed learning system for classifying prostate cancer grade groups. Yes. We see many such models that show good performance, but we observe that they don't become part of routine use in the clinic. And one big reason for this is a lack of trust in these models on the part of clinicians, also because of the so-called black box nature of AI. Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, how should we go about gaining clinicians' trust in these models? And do you think that clinicians need to develop new expertise in data science, for instance, or do you see a formal role for a data scientist in the clinical trajectory?
Esteemed opponent, thank you very much. I really appreciate your question. Indeed, so we see that there is a lot of research that goes, and we can see a lot of papers that are published, but however, when we go and have a look if there is any kind of implementation of these models, it's just hard to find there. And one reason for this is because the nature, for instance, of deep learning, which is the main used paradigm nowadays, is that it is a black box. So here we come into the concept of explainable AI. So there are, like, for instance, new architectures that come in, and then that let us see how what is the information we are capturing during the learning, and then how we make sense of it. And I think by using such novel approaches, like, clinicians will actually trust what was learned. But of course, there is a need to adopt the roles, by not all the roles, of course, in the healthcare system, but some of them to be able to understand some of the technicality of the machine learning. algorithms and how they work. So because actually it's true, you cannot trust anything that is put to you, especially that you are using it for patients. And then if you give a wrong advice based on that, then it's going to be a big problematic issue. So that's why actually it is really advisable to go and work more on explainable AI and understand, help with doctors to understand how this is working.
Thank you. That answers my question.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Then the opposition will be continued by Dr. Young. Dr. Young is from the National Heart and Lung Institute of Imperial College London in the UK. Dr. Young.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Hi, Fadila. Thanks for your nice presentation. And I must say that your thesis is one of the most beautiful one I read now. So as also recommended by Professor Mark, so he said, okay, you have done tremendous work for the engineering part for the federated learning. I also see that the system you develop can be like commercialized straight away. So my question is, can you summarize concisely about the scientific contributions of your PhD, of your thesis?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much. I feel proud to hear your sayings. So the first thing that I think is like the main impact of our work is to prove that real world blockchain can be used, because most of the other academic works that have been done on the implementation of blockchain, they use ad hoc blockchains. So which means that it's not a real world blockchain, and it is hard actually to implement in a real world, which is, of course, it has a great contribution, right? So we know that it's feasible and etc. But if someone wants to adopt such a technology, it is harder to prove. Another thing is distributed learning. We say that, okay, it can give you access to more data while keeping this data private. However, it was not really investigated in the case of rare diseases. And in my opinion, and that's what we have also tested, and we see that, okay, even though we have only a single patient, which is like the extreme use case, we still can learn valuable information from this and use AI. So, of course, there are also other ways that could be used for this use case, but at least now we know that distributed learning can assist in adopting AI for the rare disease cases. So these are the two main points that I think was the contribution of our study.
Thank you. To continue that question, so I can see that publication-wise you have done so well. And in your discussion section, in your thesis, you have some negative points. So what exactly is the conclusion of your PhD? Can you make a precise conclusion?
Yeah, of course. I mean, like, nothing is great, right? And one good thing about what we do, I know that what we did is great. However, it is not perfect because there is still a lot to be investigated. For instance, we used Ethereum 1, which is based on proof of work, which is, it takes a lot of, it's computationally expensive, and it's not really great for the environment when we take a look at the energy consumption. So now there is a new, for instance, other consensus algorithms that are there, that they are faster and cheaper also, and they are better for the environment. So we need to test these as well. So it's what we did is good, but it can be improved, and we need to go and improve that. We did most of what we did were like checking if things work or not, but still there is more work that needs to be done, for instance, in testing, like taking care of all the heterogeneity of the data that exists, that can exist in like different centers and etc. So all of this needs to be investigated. So, and I believe that when we do that also, there will be like more things that will come up that need to be checked. So I think it's good to know what is missing to what we did so that we can improve. But if we keep thinking that what we did is great and it doesn't need to be improved, then it will not go anywhere, and it will stop there, and science will keep moving forward. So that's why I actually just was very honest in the discussion. This is what we did. However, this is what needs to be improved.
Okay, thank you. I got another like a detailed question about the technical bits. So, you know, there's some
short again.
Yeah, I will be really short. So there's an effect called straggler effects, for example, due to the lower computational power or slower like network connections. So what's your views about this kind of thing, or how can you tackle it using your system?
Yes, that is one of the things that we struggled with actually. And the one way that I came up with is to giving for each partner, you just give them a certain number of time to train a model, because sometimes it's not only about this, but it's also about, you know, having some electricity shortage, because with distributed learning, we need to deal with internet connection, with electricity, and with everything. So in case there is any kind of issue, then we just put that into what I call freezer, and put this partner there, let the others train, and then when they finish training, they would get another chance actually to update the latest model that was trained using their own data. This way they will not stop, especially, you know, with decentralized learning, it's sequential, right? So if you are there and then you are waiting for your machine is extremely slow, then the others will keep waiting and the learning will not happen. So just put it away once the others are finished the training, you update. Another thing is we have also minimum requirements for each partner. So they need to have a certain power in their machines, for example.
Thank you, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. We now continue with the last opponent, Dr. Lekadir, from the University of Barcelona in Spain.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I have actually one question. Beforehand, I would like to congratulate you for this fantastic thesis. I'm a big fan of combining the blockchain and distributed learning. This is a fantastic work. There's one question I wanted to ask you, and it's related to what you wrote on page 103. You write that the type of learning is slower when compared to federated learning, where the learning is parallel, but is not subject to logistical concerns. So what you were saying is that there are some concerns, some logistical concerns with federated learning that were not met with the proposed sequential learning. And I did not fully understand, and maybe I was not fully in agreement with this part. The way I see it is that whatever logistical concern you will have in federated learning, you will have them as well in sequential learning. If, for example, one of the sites has a slow internet connection or crashes, well, in sequential learning, that would actually stop the learning. It will have even more, even bigger consequences, whereas in a federated learning, you could argue that the other sites will continue to learn, and then you could find ways of addressing that particular site. Could you comment on this comparison between federated learning and sequential learning?
Yes, of course. So, esteemed opponent, thank you very much. The difference between what I meant by logistical issues is like in federated learning, if the training happens in parallel. So when we send the weights to the server would be waiting to receive the weights of either the whole network of partners or a portion of those. So if some have the slow training or have a slow internet connection, and then the server will keep waiting until they receive this X number of partners that answers from partners that it waits for, so that it can aggregate the weights and then send back to the partners. However, in sequential learning and in CD-Stream, what we did is you will not have this kind of issue because each partner is given X amount of time to train a model. And then if the model is not uploaded,
Dear candidate, the time appointed for your defense of your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberation and our return. Welcome back. Fadila Zerka, the degree committee here present online has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense, and in view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Lambin is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present online, I hereby confer upon you, Fadila Zerka, the degree of doctors and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, you will soon receive the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary, and the supervisor, affixed with the official seal of the university shown by the beadle. I will now give you the word to your daily supervisor, Sean Walsh.
Thank you, Professor Lambin. Indeed, Fadila, you deserve a round of applause. It's with great pleasure that I can lead a testament to you on this momentous milestone in life. It's a great achievement you've made here today in front of this academic panel. And the first thing I want to touch upon, Fadila, is that you are now, you always have been, but you are now more even a role model and an example for everyone out there, but particularly, and it's no small thing, women in STEM. You have reached the highest level of academic studies and degrees in a science, technology, and engineering mathematics discipline. And this is a huge feat in and of itself. And that's because of the person you are. You are a pioneer and an adventurer, Fadila, is what I've observed as your supervisor. You joined us from Poland, so you've gone out into the world, you've spread your wings and you've embraced the uncertain, you've applied a rigor and academic thinking, but also with no small sense of adventure, because you joined a startup. You know, this is a risky endeavor. You decided to join a small company with a few people who are trying to take on the biggest challenges in healthcare. And you said, I can help, I can contribute, I can do something there. I can do something for society and for myself. And that's what you've delivered. Another quality which I believe you possess, which is in rare supply, is you have single-minded, dedicated focus. I saw you diligently, day after day, apply yourself to the problem at hand and focus on solving it. And in a world full of distractions, this is nothing too small. Most people are pulled left and right and can easily drift from problem to problem, solution to solution. But I think given the very small time frame you had to achieve your goals of 3 years, you work steadily towards it and steadfastly. And I think you should be commended for this. In that time, you showed great resilience and perseverance, Fadila, because there were plenty of setbacks on the way. You faced, uncertainty, difficulties, technical challenges, legal challenges, new challenges, ethics, administrative. This is all on top of the science, but you kept going, and that is the mark of success. Not to give in to all of these adversity and obstacles in your way, but to keep going. And that was the normal situation, because next to that we had a pandemic to deal with, which put you in a virtual environment, and like the rest of the world, you were locked off and closed off. But in the middle of your PhD, it's also another extremely demanding challenge which you had to face down and overcome, which you have today as you're being conferred with your PhD. On top of that, I think you've built a fine network and collaboration among the peers you reached out to. You have many publications, so you've got international recognition, you have local recognition in the hospitals in Liège, and your work is being carried out in Hasselt. It's happening in Maastricht. It's spread out, and you've done a fantastic work there, which is another core mission of science, which is spreading knowledge and sharing and learning both ways, at the individual level as well as the algorithm level. So that's something I wanted to emphasize here today. And lastly, which speaks for itself, you're a completer and a finisher, Fadila, because you took on this challenge, and not everyone finishes this challenge. They do not stay the course, and they do not get to the finish line, and they do not submit a scholarly thesis, which is recognized by a panel of experts as being worthy of the degree, and you've done that here today. So lastly, I just wanted to end on that by saluting you and saying it's a job well done, it's hugely deserved, and applause for what you've done. So thank you, Fadila. Thank you, and that's my feedback as your supervisor for the last 3 years.
Dear Dr. Zerka, also on behalf of the Board of Deans of Maastricht University, I congratulate you with the honor you have acquired. Of course, I also would like to congratulate your supervising team, your family, friends, colleagues. And I would like, in addition, to thank all the members of the Corona for being present here and contributing to this PhD ceremony. People from all over the world, all over the world, well, that's a bit too much, all over Europe. And it was really nice to have them all present here online, which is one of the advantages of being able to do this online. It's time for you now to celebrate, hopefully. Unfortunately, the people here won't be present at that celebration, but maybe you are able to celebrate at another time with the people here. So that being said, I hereby declare this ceremony to be ended.